Learning is in two ways. You learn by yourself, on your own, very costly because there'll be mistakes.
Yeah.
So very costly. There are farmers that have learned by mistakes and they have learned it. The other way is learning by observation. You can learn by observation. That's where there are field days. That's where there are expos. You can go to those and be able to learn one or two things. The value of a farm, we often say it's the soils. Many people think a farm value is a house. I've
Yeah.
been to farms where there is no house, and one is saying, but there's no value. On a farm, the value is the soil.
The soil.
It's a soil that gives you the pride, the yield.
Would you classify your grandmother as AI?
Our grandmothers also knew weather.
Yes.
They would know by just looking at the way this season, maybe certain pests and pests or certain pests are flying. They will know this year it will rain, or this year there will be a drought. That's AI. Yeah, it is AI, traditional AI.
Yeah.
But we are losing that because we're no longer sitting on the fireplace.
Because
Stories are not being passed on.
Yes.
Because that's the key thing that is attracting young people. Use of technologies, use of drones, as it were, use of blockchain technology, to be able to manage some of the complex challenges of agriculture.
Hello, welcome to the Money and People podcast, the show that connects the dots between financial success and the power of human capital. In this episode, we talk all things agriculture, and to help us understand this, we have Cheyo Mwenechanya on the show. Cheyo, it's a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on this podcast and looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Great, definitely. We will not disappoint. And just to break the ice and get things started, who is Cheyo?
Che, of course, is a Zambian, born in a family of three boys, and we are all alive. And of course, our mother is now late, but my dad is still alive. And I've worked in various institutions. Initially started in public sector, and that's why my passion for agric and perhaps my foundation started from. I worked for the Ministry of Agriculture in my foundation years in a technical services area as a senior agriculture officer, and then branched off into finance, and I've now worked in finance for over almost 15 years now, and I've also pivoted in finance. Now got into also what they are calling sustainable finance and impact financing, and this also has been complemented by my further studies in finance, where I did study at University of Manchester, purely in finance. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what drew you to agric?
Very interesting, Henry. Initially, when I started, it wasn't a passion. I actually didn't think I'll work in agri. That was not my initial thinking. My background was actually accounting. I did bookkeeping in my junior secondary school. I also did principles of accounting in my senior secondary school. And I was all set to go and do accounts or finance. That was my initial thought. But as things were, I found myself at university and there was a double enrollment in my year. And I was advised, initially actually admitted to do metallurgical engineering. And then there was an opportunity to do agroforestry at Cobalt University. And they told me that the school is full because there's a double enrollment. 10 University of Zambia had closed. So we only had one institution that
Yeah.
was what was enrolling. So I enrolled and I was advised just stay in the university. And then in the following year, you can pursue your interest. And later on, in fact, in the same year, I was also admitted at University of Zambia to do, to do economics. But I'd already progressed perhaps about 8 months into the first year. And I started liking the program. It was science. And all of a sudden, the passion was aroused within me to pursue science. And yeah, that's how I went into science. And then subsequent, the ministry was looking for agricultural officers, and that's how I joined. And interestingly, I was asked to pick up one area, and I picked Mkushi. That was my first area, and Mkushi was is predominantly well known for agriculture. And I felt that's a place perhaps where I can pick up, my skill set, and that was the area, and it was rewarding. When I went there, I had an opportunity to be exposed to seeing what a commercial farming entity looks like, and I saw how you run it, and I saw how it can be done, and that's where my passion then was ignited. And because of my passion, in the financial sector, my talent was identified, and joined banking without any banking experience. And the only thing I could offer was my technical expertise in agriculture. And the idea was potentially we can teach finance, but we can't teach agriculture. So let's pick one that has the expertise in this area. And that's where it started. And it's been very rewarding. And the transition of agriculture now has just, given me the passion and the desire to just continue doing it. Yeah, and today I can say that's my expertise, and that's how I found myself there.
Oh, fantastic. And to get into it, in your view, how does agricultural banking differ from traditional banking? And what unique opportunities does this offer for young professionals?
Yeah, and very very interesting question, Henry. First of all, I think having been at a leadership level in banking is that I've also had an opportunity to look and recruit and look for talent. And that's one of the key challenges we do first to identify and be able to recruit bankers that understand agriculture. So what does it require? It's the interesting part of it is that you need to have credit skills or financial skills, very important, because in banking the basic function of banking is lending.
Hmm.
That's the foundation. Of course, the banking has evolved, but that's normally the traditional perspective. So, someone who understands risk perhaps fits into this area. Somebody who is passionate about, relationship management. So, perhaps maybe they put it to two perspectives. There's a technical side of skills that perhaps are needed and what it will take, which means that you need to have strong credit skills or financial skills or business skills. You also need to be able to have very strong, because it's agri,
Yeah.
what you call value chain finance.
Mm.
So understanding the ecosystem of agriculture. Agriculture is from, we call it farm to fork. So from the time crops go in the ground to the time you put it to the market, all that is what you call value chain or ecosystem. You need to be able to understand all those dynamics because they affect how agriculture is done. But now you also need soft skills, and the
Mm.
soft skills now is that engagement, skills about engagement, because agriculture is about engaging various parties. Because the ecosystem is longer in agriculture. It's not like other industry where it's quite short span. Agriculture is a long, you're dealing with input providers, for example fertilizer and seed. You're dealing with technological engineering, for
Hmm.
example,
Hmm.
tractors, equipment. You're also dealing with service providers that provide advisory services. You're dealing with financing itself in there. You're dealing with marketing, understanding the dynamics of marketing. You're dealing with global view of how commodities, you're dealing with, for example, food security. So there are so many facets that you
Hmm.
need to have a strong soft skills on engagement, especially now. And then now you also need to have a good understanding of what sustainability means,
Hmm.
because agriculture is one of the sectors and areas that have been quite impacted by climate change.
Yeah.
And we projecting that as the population grows, as the saying or adage goes, God is not creating any more land. We've got the same land,
Yeah.
but yet the population is growing, and we need to feed the growing population. So these things of sustainability are becoming more topical and prominent around this space, and it's one of the key skills one has to possess.
Mm.
Yeah, but not easy. But I would like to believe that to some extent, if you've got a passion about something, you can. There's a lot of information these days. Perhaps it's maybe being able to have the passion and not look out for the where you can gain the expertise and experience.
Okay, and which brings me to the next question. So here's a graduate with no farming background. Can they enter and thrive into the agriculture banking sector?
Yes, they can. For example, a good example is myself. I didn't have
Mm,
background, for example, finance. But I think what's important, and that's what has been discussed lately, is that we need to make agriculture appealing to young people. The challenge we have historically with agriculture is that it's been perceived as an industry for old people.
yeah, after you
It's
retire.
after retiring,
Yeah.
that's where you want to do agriculture. I think that's where the challenge is. So we need to cultivate the passion around young people. Appreciating agriculture is not a profession you do after your later your late years of your career, but it's something that is rewarding and perhaps interesting. And now there is Internet of Things where it
Mm-hmm.
brings in, because that's the key thing that is attracting young people. Use of technologies, use of drones, as it were,
Mm.
use of blockchain technology, to be able to manage some of the complex challenges of agriculture. So there are now interesting things that can bring young people that this is a space perhaps they should be able to find themselves in. But passion is important. Passion drives you. It's not enough in itself, but passion is a
Takes it.
fuel.
Yeah,
It's a fuel.
yes, it's the fuel.
Yeah,
You still need a lot more things, but at least have the fuel first.
yeah.
Okay. And in terms of skills availability or scarcity of them, which agri-finance or agribusiness roles are currently in high demand and why?
Yeah, for example, I've mentioned now sustainability. It's in high demand. Skill set of who understand not just, for example, financing or agriculture, those that may think longer term. So that is becoming a very strong skill. But also there is also an aspect that we've always seen in finance or in business that profit is the key thing.
Yeah.
We're always now looking beyond profit. You need to invest in the communities that you operate in, which is creating impact. It's also part of the value creation
Mm-hmm.
that I can talk about. So there is now need to be able to look at skill set about understanding how do you create value, not only to the shareholder by the bottom line profit, but also in the community operating. Because at the end of the day, a business is as strong as its community it
Yep.
operates in.
Yep.
But also being able to appreciate the challenges of the environmental issues that come with it. Like for example, drought. There is a now high levels of pests and diseases.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is increasing heat that is affecting productivity of agriculture. So that is also coming quite strongly. And understanding also common things these days, Internet of Things I've talked about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Tech
Mm-hmm.
is a big skill one has to look at, because we also need to reduce, like for example, food waste.
Yeah.
And for example, in other parts of the world, they can know, for example, if they're picking up is what they're calling traceability. When you get into a retail in a supermarket and you pick up a product on the shelf, there is now what is being looked at, being able to appreciate how was that product grown.
Mm-hmm.
Is it organic? So you can pick up, perhaps scan with your phone and be able to know what sort of treatment was given to that. So that is real time information that is being looked at. There's also now use of satellite imagery,
Yeah.
so that when you're sitting in an office, for example, from where I come from banking, is that I don't have to travel so many kilometers and miles away from the office to go and assess a farm. I can do it remotely, sitting
Mm-hmm.
on a
Mm-hmm.
or on a computer, and I can know where this farmer is. I can use AI technology and perhaps know historically what has been going
What's been going on?
on
Yeah.
that on that. There's also now issues, for example, like insurance risk, which is risk mitigation, that is evolving into other areas, what they're calling all weather index,
Mm-hmm.
and all that, use of blockchain and all that. So there, yeah, it's changing, and it's going in that direction in terms of key skills that are coming up. Yeah.
Okay. And you've touched a lot on technology, AI, drones, etc. How how do you think these are changing the way banks assess and fund projects?
Yeah, first of all, for banks, it means there is efficiency. Technology brings efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
means decision making can be made very quickly. As I said, instead of you going all the way to go and assess, you can make real-time decision quickly, and and decide what sort of risk you're sitting, or opportunity that you're sitting with. So from a banking side, that's one. The other one is also customer experience. It
Mm-hmm.
means that you can deliver your products and services to a customer very efficiently, and with a human face, if I may put it that way, because you are now using technology to identify and know your customer. What we call KYC.
Mm-hmm.
That aids your KYC in terms of a bank. There's also risk mitigation measures that technology is bringing, that you can assess a risk, using, for example, using satellite imagery, that you can know historically what's been going on the farm, and perhaps
Mm-hmm.
what sort of challenges could have been on the farm. Unlike in the past, you've got to wait, because lending, oftentimes we look historically,
Yeah,
but of course the history cannot tell you. History is not the future as well.
it's not the
it,
future.
it just gives you comfort, but you
Yeah.
also want to lend to the future, because that's where perhaps the business is going. So from a banking perspective, technology is, as I said, is bringing efficiency, time. It's bringing delivering better customer service, risk mitigation, and also narrowing what we call in finance information asymmetry, is
Mm-hmm.
where there is a gap between the customer and the bank. By having technology, you can narrow that gap, so that you can avoid things, for example, where there is a gap in terms of finance that goes to beneficiaries, and you can also address issues of moral hazard, where there is misuse of
Mm-hmm.
proceeds that come out of facilities. Yeah.
So it basically gives you a much broader spectrum. It enhances the accuracy of your decisions, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
also, I like the part where you talked about information asymmetry, because I think asymmetry has always been a problem, especially in Zambia.
Mm,
That gap, I think, has always forced us into making a lot of wrong decisions,
mm,
because you just do not have perfect information. And then, in the absence of that, there are so many assumptions, and you end up getting it wrong, no
mm.
matter how great you are. But if that's really bridging that gap, then maybe we're in for something good going forward.
Yeah, and then the negative side of it also is that we now can't fund agriculture because we label it as a risky industry. It's perhaps
Mm,
maybe we don't know. Yeah, but it's just that we don't know.
yeah,
But all of us every day do eat food. So where does it come from?
yeah,
So who funds it? So if food is coming on the table, and we shall always eat, because that's a basic need
we
of a
don't,
human being.
we don't have a choice. We just have to figure it out. Still, we have to make it work.
Exactly. So uh, we need to narrow, and the passion also for me is, how do we support smallholder farmers, because they're the
Yeah.
majority that grow our food, and they are not in the financial sector, for example.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we don't know what they do, how they sell, and all those kind of things, and we need to figure it out, and technology perhaps can narrow that gap to bridge that challenge of information asymmetry.
No, definitely. And what are some of the most promising areas of growth and opportunity in agricultural finance, and how can one get involved?
Yeah, I think there are huge opportunities. As I said, because there's a growing population. For example, let's just bring it home. Zambia's population has doubled every 10 years. The
Yeah,
last census were 10 million,
we're about 10 to
10 to
11,
11
then
million.
we're
The
now
last
pushing
census now
20.
is about 20 or 19 million.
Yeah.
Which means that we've got to produce more. So there lies the opportunity. The second opportunity also is that there's a growing middle class.
Mm-hmm.
We often say the foundation, if you look at food systems, is that first of all, people look for carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
a basic need to just give you energy.
Shima.
So Shima, you're in Shima. But now there's also a growing trend to eat bread, because it's quicker. Some of you have seen how some of the food stores that sell fritters, people buy them, and even vehicles queuing up.
Mm-hmm.
That's, for
Mm-hmm.
me, that's wheat.
Yeah.
That is growing. People buy bread as if it's been given for free, especially hot bread and all that. So it's a growing rice. There's a shift in terms of diet of people going now into rice, away from the Nshima we know. There is also a shift in terms of people looking at nutrition. There's need for people. The people are now looking at eating millet, because it's got high fiber. better nutrition. Sorghum is also one of them, but we don't have enough of it or process it that is enough for us to be able to take it to market. But then the shift also starts moving to people getting into protein. As I said, the foundation is energy first of all. Then it transitions into protein.
Yep.
When people have the money or there's a growing middle class, they start demanding to eat not just the carbohydrates. They also want to have a protein on the side.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think that's why you define now you're doing well. People say I'm eating meat, I'm eating could be eggs, it could be chicken, and all that. It grows into that. Then people start looking for nice things these days. I want red peppers, I want yellow peppers, these I want baby marrows. People
Mm.
start looking for now niche food. They start looking for herbs. It's a niche as well. So they're different classes, and the population is growing in all those, and that's why those opportunities are coming from,
Okay.
to be able to satisfy that need. So we haven't met that need yet, but I think we there's a growing population, there's
Mm.
a growing change in food tastes, and also by health, and there's also a huge discussion around non-communicable diseases,
Mm.
most of them being driven by our diet.
Yeah.
So there's often gonna is a shift, and that has to be supplied to market to satisfy the growing change of tastes of our population. Yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting. So we do have small planet, growing population, increasing the demand for our food products. How easy is it to get involved, or is it just the same players increasing on their capacity to supply? But I've never really done agriculture. Can I wake up today and say, look, I want to be part of that? What's the easiest route to get into it and to start seeing results already?
Yeah. So, what I would say is that's a very, very interesting question. So there are different schools of thought, and others haven't worked. There was a school of thought is let's increase area of production. Let's
Mm,
just expand. The population is growing, perhaps, yes, but we're also aware that that has also got negative effects on our environment, because then we're clearing more land, cutting down more
yeah,
trees,
yeah.
which are what we call a carbon sink.
Mm-hmm,
They take away our carbon dioxide that causes climate change, and all that. So the view now is that you need to be efficient in the area where you are. For example, there's now what they're calling urban farming.
mm,
Urban farming is where you can farm even on the rooftop.
I've
Yeah,
seen
you
something
can
there.
farm on
Yeah.
the rooftop. It's common in South Africa, for example. It's quite common. So it's not even far. We're not even talking about Western, world. It's quite close to where we are. There's down that. They are now what they're calling growing your crops using, tunnels, where you don't have no soil, you use vapor and all that. In Zambia, it's there, by the way. I've seen it, where someone is growing lettuce on a tunnel, no soil. They
Mm,
just use a medium called, a medium, not soil. That is, it's what you call vertical farming.
mm.
What that means is that going up means you're using less land. So you grow your lettuce on a vertically instead of growing, horizontally.
So it then sorts out the problem we've been having in Zambia because we have what 5 by 2 no, okay, not 5 by 2 plots, but anyway, we have very, very small plots, and like I want to have a garden, but there's no space.
No, you
So
can.
so you can now just
Yeah,
start
you
going
can
up.
go up. You can use other people use flower pots.
Mm-hmm.
You can grow your herbs using flower pots. People have seen people growing garlic in their backyard,
Mm-hmm.
growing ginger in your backyard. You can do it,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to start somewhere. I know a lady, for example, who started supplying lettuce to a restaurant, and then the demand became too big. She couldn't satisfy that demand, and she recruited women around herself, and in
Mm-hmm.
the neighborhood says, can I have your small piece of your garden? Can I you? And they came up together, and they were able to aggregate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another model. How do you do it? As you asked that question,
Yeah.
start from yourself as an individual, alone as a farmer, gain the competency and understand the challenges. Start on a scale, small scale rather, and learn from there. Then you scale up, and you can
Mm-hmm.
scale up by doing the methodology I've talked about, where you use people around you, is what you call, where an outgrower scheme, where you don't have enough land yourself, but you can scale outside yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Others bring into you, and you're able to still beat market. And then you also have a better voice,
Mm-hmm.
because agriculture also is that prices, you have a better voice when you have scale
Yeah.
in terms of commodity, pricing. So you
Mm-hmm.
can use that methodology. The other one is that you can also pass on your skills and competencies you've picked up from yourself. You can do that model. It could be chickens. It's the same model you can play around. You've got a contract to supply chickens, for example, yourself to a peer, where you sell your chickens to your peers. But if you want to scale up, for example, into a retail supermarket or a bigger market, you can work around your neighborhood or put in. I know already there's also a similar program where one is now working with women, old women, some of them widows, and he gives the inputs to those women, and they pay in kind through the chickens, and that's how he manages. It's another model you can use. So it's a good model in an area like, for example, urban areas where the land mass area is smaller. You just use your neighborhood to
Mm-hmm.
scale up, and be able to still meet that demand. Yeah.
How much education is out there for people? Because I'm learning about a lot of these methods. I mean, it's answering a lot of questions I had in my mind if I wanted to go into it, partnering with neighbors, the vertical farming. But I mean, I'm privileged to be with you on stage right now. But or maybe that's the purpose of the show to also reach out to other people.
Yes.
But how much dissemination is there? How much teaching in new ways, in Zambian ways of doing it? Because it almost also speaks to the Zambian community. We have small pieces or no pieces of land, and we're
Yeah.
saying, how do we still scale up and be successful?
Yeah, it's a very not easy,
Yeah.
if I may put it that way. You see, learning is in two ways. You learn by yourself on your own, very costly because there'll be mistakes.
Yeah.
So very costly. There are farmers that have learned by mistakes and they have learned it. The other way is learning by observation.
Mm.
You can learn by observation. That's where there are field days. That's where there are expos. You can go to those and be able to learn one or two things. But more so these days, there's access to. You can go
Yeah, on the internet.
on YouTube and pick up some of these things. And yeah, information these days is readily available.
Mhm.
But perhaps maybe the issue is execution,
Yeah.
being willing to try out something, and that's why I'm saying start smaller. Many people think, when you start calculating, because somebody tells you there is a market for this product, I was actually reading last night that okra is in short supply, and the price has moved from a bag of 350 to 500 to 1,000 within a space of 1 week or so.
Mm.
And one who comes across that information says, "I'm going to put up okra now." And if you have a piece of land, perhaps that's not the way. The way is go and learn. And if you've got a backyard, maybe that's the one.
Yeah.
Learn from there so that you can replicate and
And
and, and,
start
and scale up.
replicating.
And that's how it works. But information is out, it's not so readily available. I'm privileged, perhaps in my case, is that I have an opportunity to see and be there and learn and observe. So perhaps I'm seeing it easier, but maybe the interests can drive you to learn. Um, Personally, I've organized, road trips and shows
Mm.
for farmers
Mm.
to expose them to successful projects.
Mhm.
Perhaps that's another way I can contribute to that, transfer of knowledge and skill set. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you see the relationship between agricultural finance and food security evolving in the future?
Yeah, it's these two now are related. And as I earlier mentioned, is that we've got food. In fact, globally we've got enough food.
We
But
do?
yes, we do. If you work out how much food waste goes there, it's amazing. We waste a lot of food.
So it's not that there's no food, it's just that we are wasting a lot of food.
There's a waste of a lot of food. That's one. So perhaps yes, there are people that don't have the food. Yes, they don't have the food, but there's also a lot of food waste. So
Hmm.
we need to address that thing. So we need to address efficiencies from that perspective. And the food systems, because of, as I said, there's a lot of food waste. So food systems refers to from production to until the food finds itself on the table. So the whole supply chain,
Yeah.
the whole process of how food moves is what you call food systems. Now, there is a growing demand for us to be able to finance those food systems because of increasing population, as I put it. We also need to look for alternative ways of financing because of the challenges of climate change. So that is also becoming a challenge. It's becoming more and more difficult for farmers, for example, to produce the food because of um, increasing pests and diseases. So we've got to think around there. But because of as I said, growing population, because of the change in food tastes of our population, there is a growing demand for financing, an opportunity to finance some of these food systems that are coming up to address the gap. And also, we lose a lot of food. Like I said, losses are not only at household level. For example, if you have food and you put it to waste, there's also losses that happen on the farm,
Yeah.
what we
Yeah.
call post-harvest losses.
Mm.
When you harvest your crop, you lose it because it's not properly stored.
Storage,
So
yes.
there's need for us to finance storage. A typical example for Zambia, if Zambia produced all the maize that we are looking for example, we have actually don't have enough storage of where we can keep it. So it can go to waste. So there's an opportunity to fund infrastructure, for example, like where we can store our food. A biblical example is what Joseph did. He says, let's store food for the next 7 years.
For the next
But
year.
to
Yeah.
store that food for the next 7 years, and what Joseph was talking about is our FRA in our case,
Capacity, yes.
So we need to build infrastructure that supports that. Then there's also, if you go to, for example, Soweto market in our Zambian context, is that tomato goes to waste. Go there, a lot of tomato is wasted. A lot of other vegetables are wasted. There is also an opportunity to put in cold chain so that we don't waste. So there is an opportunity to find cold chain and also create the whole value chain or ecosystem. Food moves on cold chain from harvest. If we are going to preserve the quality and quantity of the food, then it must be well kept in cold chain all the way from sourcing to where it's finding itself into the market or perhaps into your kitchen. It must be properly kept and stored. Yeah.
So what I'm getting here is that I don't only need to be a farmer. Maybe I'm not good at farming, but I can still get involved by maybe being the guy that puts the storage facility, or, you know, I can just have cold storage supply trucks. So there's still a lot of avenues for non-farmers to get involved in farming itself.
Yeah. And that's why I said that agriculture is a long value chain. There are various internodes in where you can intervene. As you exactly put it, you can either be a logistics business. You can also provide technology. For example, in the West, for example, when the food goes, they pick up, for example, let's just give an example. The food has found itself in the retail supermarket,
Yeah.
and you find that batch has gone bad for some reason, or it's going bad very quickly. Imagine how do you trace back where it came from and be able to, like, for example, there was aflatoxins.
Yeah.
Remember in
Yeah.
the mini meal, aflatoxins.
Yes, that was last year.
We didn't know where it came from. Of
Yeah.
course, we knew where it came from. The reason was that the maize was just not properly stored. The
Yes.
moisture content was higher, and automatically that creates aflatoxins in the maize. But if we had a technological system, for example, if we had a blockchain system, we've got traceability. It's easier for us to know which batch, where that maize came from, which farm, which tracking business. We can use that. And so you can provide such services that is able to address that. The others that you can provide drones.
Yes.
It's a drones. Drones now can be used, for example, to monitor what's going on the farm, to perhaps maybe what you call spot diseases or pests. Instead of me going, for example, labor is a challenge these days.
Yeah.
How do I still maximize my labor on a farm? Is that you can use drones to be able to scout pests and diseases remotely. That is Internet of Things, use of technology. So the agriculture, that's why they say employs a lot of people. Think about it. From the time you plant to the time you find the food on the table, how many jobs, how many people have had the transporters, grain handlers, storage, suppliers of chemicals and diseases, of chemicals, agrochemicals. So many things can be done, and so many interventions can be put in. Yeah.
I think we actually need to preach this a whole lot more because it's been very enlightening. Because I think every time we think of farming, it's just crop in the soil, a harvest, take to FRA. So the only thing there is just, the guy who farms puts fertilizer, the guy who harvests, and FRA trucks, I think, or something, they come through and they take those.
Mm.
But you can be the guy who supplies the drones. You can supplement FRA. So
Yes.
maybe if FRA in Pushi has 10 storage sites, what's to stop you from putting another three?
Mm.
And you charge a premium. Okay.
Yeah. No. So I mean, the opportunities are immense,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps thinking like that is what will make agriculture successful.
No,
Think broadly, think beyond just a farm.
yeah.
Yeah, and perhaps that should be the way.
Yeah, because I can also create a company, a startup, which then traces, which does the food tracing.
Yes,
Because maybe the farmer won't do it themselves,
yes.
but I can come in and charge a fee to say we can track this and create a report,
Mm,
which will be out there so that we
mm,
can, whoever is buying and is interested in organic or non-organic can actually just tap into us and we can recommend them to you and
yeah,
you can, okay.
yeah. In fact, in my master's program, one of my projects, I looked at a model like that, a business model that
Mm,
is able to address traceability and real time using blockchain
yeah,
technology,
yeah.
so that it's real time. Blockchain is real time
Yes,
information. You
yes, it
can
is.
you can know today, instead of trying to find out what went wrong. Real time today, oh, there was a delay at picking up at a farm. It
Yes.
took 3 hours.
When the
And
standard time is supposed
yeah,
to be,
perhaps that's where the problem was. It
yeah.
was exposed. It didn't go through the cold chain quickly enough, and maybe that's where the problem started from. Yeah, yeah,
This will really enhance the value chain.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Coming back to technology, how is AI being used to evaluate credit risk for farmers or predict crop yields for loan approvals?
Yes, these days it's been used, for example, for risk mitigation
Mm-hmm.
in terms of insurance. You can use models like AI to predict the likelihood of certain risk events happening.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Mm-hmm.
can now do that, and you can now provide a financial product for insurance to address that challenge. From a lending perspective, you can use, for example, AI to be able to predict historically what's been going on
What's
a
been
farm,
going on? Yeah.
without asking, every ton of information from a farmer. Bring this, bring that, and also reliable information
Mm-hmm.
that you yourself are able to see via satellite and
Mm-hmm.
use of AI to be able to analyze, perhaps looking at the quality of the soil that you're seeing and mixing with the data of what sort of crops that one is
Mm-hmm.
intending to
Mm-hmm.
grow, you can likely predict the yields.
The years.
So that informs you as a financier to know the viability of the enterprise. So that addresses, so there are a few things it addresses. One, so it addresses what we call credit origination. We can originate credit better. Secondly, you can also monitor better, because then you can remotely monitor also what's going on a farm. So all that addresses the whole process of your loan management system process, if you're a financier, and also quicker decision making, well informed. In many times in finance, we base our decisions on financial information,
Mm-hmm.
but we also know that the financial information is historical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For example, today we may be looking at information of financial statements. For many businesses, the year end is December.
Yeah.
So we are looking at year end December 2024. But year end 2024 means it's crops that were grown partly in 2023
Yes.
into 2024.
Yes.
And the farmer is in 2025, is looking for money to grow crops in 2025.
Yep. Yep.
How do I make a decision, well informed, by not just relying on information that is perhaps stale? Is
Mm-hmm.
I can get real time information that I can know today. We can use technologies to base your decision. You can know, we use various things, for example, to assess income statement. For example,
Mm-hmm.
I can create an income statement based on the yields, based on what sort of the farmer is growing. I can plug in my costs. I can perhaps do a model of an income statement
Yeah.
so I can know its profitability. I can also perhaps know the value of the asset of the farm, the farm value of the value of the farm. We often say it's the soils.
Hmm.
Many people think a farm value is a house. I've
Yeah.
been to farms where there is no house, and one is saying, but there's no value. On a farm, the value is the soil.
It's the soil.
It's a soil that gives you the price, the yield. So
Mhm.
using technology, you can know the value of the soil and perhaps add valuations. Farm valuations can be added, which becomes also useful, for business decisions.
As a layperson, just adding on to what you said. So if I want a loan and they say, what's your collateral? And I say, I have a piece of land. And, they say there's no house. Can I then tell them, have you tested the soil and do you know that what that soil can grow if you were to utilize it? Because there are certain crops which are only specific to certain soils. And if I have it, can I use that to pitch a loan facility?
In fact, even better. If you're able to use your soils and you've done your analysis, it's even better.
Mm,
Traditionally, that's not the way it's done. I think we do it, it's done wrongly in many cases,
mm.
is that you assess looking at buildings.
Yes.
I know infrastructure buildings are important. There are farm structures and assets that are also important.
Hmm.
For example, a storage house. You also need to store your grain. So
Yep.
perhaps it's got value to the farm.
Hmm.
You need to store your fertilizer. Otherwise, if you leave it exposed, it will lose its potency and all that. You need to store your chemicals well kept and all that. You need to have equipment like tractors. You need
Yeah.
to have infrastructure like irrigation. Yes, they are valuable and we can put value to them.
Hmm.
But there's also one you can have all that infrastructure. But the primary goal on a farm is to put the seed in the
In the
ground
ground.
and it gives you the yield. So if you are able to do soil analysis, that aids the value. And I think we need to move, and that's why I'm proposing, we need to move to valuations of farms and assessment based on soil value and quality,
Hmm.
because that's what will give you, what you're projecting to grow. And it's a win-win for both. Both to the farmer, it means that you don't lose the money, you generate the income you're looking for, but also from a finance institution perspective, they are also know the risk that they're taking, that this is a good risk perhaps.
On AI, would you classify your grandmother as AI? Because she would tell you when you plant here, mchakacha what it used to grow. So just get this soil and plant it at this territory.
No, Henry is so spot on. It's not just the soil. Our grandmothers also knew weather.
Yes.
They would know by just looking at the way this season, like maybe certain pests and pests or certain pests are flying. They will know this year it will rain, or this year there will be a drought. That's AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is AI. Traditional AI.
Yeah.
But we are losing that because we're no longer sitting on the fireplace.
Because we always,
Stories are not being passed on.
yes.
So perhaps maybe that's where we're going to the modern AI, is because we've lost track, we've lost stories. We've lost majority of people that kept, and our beloved grandmothers and grandfathers that were custodians of information,
Mhm.
perhaps in our villages, on the farms and all that. But yeah, they knew a lot about the farms that they were. Yeah,
I like my grandmother AI. She would don't plant.
yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah.
So that was actually AI.
It was
It
AI.
was AI in its
Yeah.
sense. Okay, great. And what are some of the most significant challenges facing the agriculture industry today? And are these things being addressed and how?
Yeah, first of all, they are being addressed, because otherwise then won't, not, maybe not to the bigger extent. We still have a funding gap to
Hmm.
fund our food systems. We for example, the context of Zambia, 80% or even not 90% of our food is grown by smallholder farmers, and they have no access to finance
Hmm.
whatsoever. But there's now a growing need for us to come and be able to assist and support and fund smallholder farmers. There's also a challenge of climate change. It's even ravaging the challenge already. Already, as I put it, there's already very little access to finance. And
Mm-hmm.
then you've also got, farmers that are being affected by climate change, losing the very little investment that they have put on the farms. So that is drawing backwards. So there's also that being addressed. There is now climate financing opportunities, for example, that are coming up to be able to come up with a financing models and instruments that recognize or address climate change. Um, there's a huge deficit in terms of, there's a huge food losses and wastes that are taking place. It's a big challenge which we need to address. There's also, we are losing productive land. Majority of our land, Henry, if you have lived long enough in Lusaka, you just need to move a few kilometers outside Lusaka, and you realize that perhaps used to be our sources of our vegetables
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and food produce, but now have been turned into
Structures.
structures.
Yeah.
So that is a big challenge. We are losing our underground water also because of that, because some of those lands and forests that we had around us, where they are recharge of our watershed
Mm-hmm.
systems. So we're losing water. And you don't need to go very far. Just look at yourself around and you see how many boreholes are going dry,
Mm-hmm.
some of the farms, and we need to address that. That is a big issue, and we need to address it.
Yeah.
Energy is also one challenge. On the farm, you require energy as well, and so energies, and also to keep your not only on the farm, but also you realize, for example, like in the year 2024, 2025, it was a challenge to grow your chickens,
Mm-hmm.
fresh chickens, because there was no cold chain. So that
Mm-hmm.
also becomes a challenge. So that energy is
So the
becoming a big
energy,
challenge,
yeah.
because then we can't store our fresh produce. Yeah. So and there are we do there's recognition from an industry perspective. There's that recognition to address that, and perhaps also there is a call by professionals to also come up.
Mm-hmm.
I can comfortably say that there is, by law now, there's what they are calling Agriculture Institute of Zambia,
Mm-hmm.
that every practicing agriculturalist must be licensed. It's by law now. It's an act.
Mm-hmm.
It's by law. You're required to be licensed. And Henry, I can safely say I'm one of the few licensed and a fellow of the Agriculture Institute of Zambia.
Nice.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you.
And with climate change, I know we've talked about it a lot. How is sustainable agriculture shaping new financial products or investment priorities?
Yeah, so now there is a shift, for example, to not only consider thinking shorter term thinking, because of agriculture is a long term investment.
Mm-hmm.
So the shift now is to be able to perhaps look at funding that is more patient and long term in nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one of how the financing landscape is changing. We're now talking about a blend, what you call blended finances. Blended finance, simply put, is where you catalyze private sector funding using public sector or philanthropic funding. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm using jargons here now. It's where you're using funds or money from wealth individuals, that's philanthropic funding,
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
have a cause, for example, they have a cause to be able to support maybe food globally or address a challenge of climate, as it were, and they say we will put in this money so that the private sector can also put in. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, there are now models where for every, say, a dollar raised maybe to fund a particular cause, that they can fund maybe three times
Yeah.
more. So they are saying for every private sector funding that goes in, they can fund maybe three times, maybe say $3.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for that, so that is what you call blended finance, because they're
Okay.
now blending different
Mm-hmm.
financing. But as I said, we no longer just thinking commercial. We do know that, for example, if we don't continue to support smallholder farmers
Yeah.
who have food challenges, and food is a security issue. If there's food insecurity, what does it mean?
Problems.
Then we are not safe to run our
Yeah.
businesses. So there is that thinking now that must come in. We also need to address, you know, issues, for example, of sustainability. How do we still address, you know, employment challenges? It's a security issue as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Agriculture employs more than 70%, particularly in rural areas. So we need to create jobs for that. So there's a realization now, in essence, to be able to deliver impact and also be able to go more patient and be able to also fund technological innovations, perhaps, fund startups
Yeah.
that are advancing technology, funding, for example, innovative financing models
Mm-hmm.
now from the traditional ones. So those are some of the things that are changing over time in the financing landscape.
Okay. And coming back to careers, what are some of the biggest hurdles that young people are facing in agriculture and how can they overcome them?
Yeah, the biggest headwind, agriculture is not immune. It's not the only, it's just like many other young people. I think the biggest challenge is majority of the learning and skills and learning these days is highly academic. So it's a big challenge. And I think that's why it's important for universities, colleges to train, for example, the old ways of NRDC,
Mm-hmm.
the Natural Resource Development College, then is that you actually run a farm. Yeah, practically
Mm-hmm.
there was a farm there, and we need to go back to there because that's where you learn. When you leave college, you are able to go and practice. For example, when you are a veterinary and you have completed a livestock office, a livestock trained individual, you know what it means to vaccinate an animal.
Yeah.
You know what to do. You know
Mm-hmm.
how to identify diseases, and all that. So one of the key challenges perhaps is to be able to address our learning systems,
Mm-hmm.
that they have become more practical. Let's do more practical. But I do also recognize that government curriculum the education curriculum is changing,
Yeah, it
and
is
that aspect
evolving.
is being addressed as a way of trying to overcome this learning system. The jobs aren't so many; there are only few jobs
Yeah.
oftentimes, but perhaps young people also should start thinking as entrepreneurs. So if you can't find there is agriculture is not a white collar job; it's a blue
Yep.
collar job. So perhaps we need hands-on skills.
Mm-hmm.
There, in fact, Henry, there are very limited tractor operators and equipment operators in this country. The interventions that have gone in to address this, by the way. So there are opportunities, perhaps. So young people, I think one of the key challenges, perhaps maybe they may be facing is maybe lack of access to finance because you are young. So we need to promote perhaps incubators.
Mm-hmm.
We need to promote perhaps apprenticeships,
Yeah.
which also from a policy perspective from government is that has now come into play.
Yeah. I've seen apprenticeship. There's even a national internship policy
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
So
And
perhaps maybe that will address some of the challenges of young people. Maybe they can walk into a commercial bank or financial institution and be able to have access to finance. Because without experience also of farming, it's difficult for you
no,
to be
definitely.
funded in terms of
Definitely.
your enterprise. Yeah.
I know my sister in Shimoni at NRDC is actually doing a great job. She's a lecturer there. I don't know if she drives a tractor, but I wouldn't put it past her. I don't put it past her, but I know the guys at NRDC are really, I think they're turning it around. So it sounds like also a case of really going back to the basics. We may have
Yes.
abandoned certain things which were really necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And are the most promising agri careers in corporate business, rural banking, or international trade?
In all areas, but rural
Mm,
banking perhaps is becoming more prominent.
mm-hmm,
I know that, but there's need. All these areas are important.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like as we earlier said, agriculture is a long span.
Yeah, it is.
So in trade is important because we can produce the crops, but if we can't sell them or trade them, it's a problem. So we need to understand trade. So that is to be corporate is as well. There are corporate structures that are there. Sources in some cases to source funding, you need to understand the corporate structure.
Mm,
And I know that, and also corporate finance. You need to understand, how do you create value? for an agribusiness. The agribusinesses, large agribusinesses, conglomerates. So you need to have some level of experience and expertise around corporate finance. So, but it's a married. Everything is important.
Mm-hmm.
But now there is more need also for you know,
Rural banking.
rural banking.
Yeah.
And we also the reason why also that is so heavy, perhaps maybe to just amplify, is that we are very little financial services on the last mile in
Mm-hmm.
rural areas, and that's where we need to push. The central bank is pushing a lot around financial
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
inclusion, and we need to go to the last mile.
Mm-hmm.
We need to push to the rural area,
Yeah.
and maybe that's why also that is becoming more and more important.
And in 10 years, how do you foresee AI and automation transforming jobs in agricultural finance and production?
Yeah, we also we see a lot of personally, I see a lot of uh, support. I think in terms of helping make decisions, and that's why I do. Others will say it's taking away jobs. No, no, no. It's helping
Mm-hmm.
make
Mm-hmm.
decisions in some
Mm-hmm.
cases. There's a negative side in some cases, but I think generally, if used correctly, it can support, decisions that can be made very quickly. So I foresee going in the next few years is that we may see more financing going, for example, to smallholder farmers. That oftentimes financial institutions have been risk averse to provide that, so that will help. We may see we may see more financial inclusion. We may see a reduction in terms of credit risk, adding credit risks, mitigation, for example, use of insurance. Um, there will also be better, predictive models in
Mm-hmm.
terms of
Mm-hmm.
what perhaps is coming ahead. For example, be able to know in future, say, look, should we be planting or should we be planting these types of varieties when we know a drought is coming?
Yes.
Because some of these things have had cycles.
Yeah.
So that, in my view, so it will help risk mitigation. It will better support decision making of who do you lend to. It will help know, for example, your customer. So it will aid KYC, know your customer,
Quicken
uh,
processes.
yeah, and processes,
Mm.
and just enhance the way we interact, the way business interact with their customers. So enhance customer experience and products. There'll be perhaps more products going to farmers. Perhaps that's what I see going forward, and more efficiency on the part of the farm, because then they can reduce their cost because they know. You lose because you don't know.
Yep.
Loss is because you don't know in most cases. Now that you know, you minimize the losses,
Minimize
and
and
so perhaps there will be better profitability. Yeah.
okay. And lastly, what are we going to remember Cheyo for in agriculture?
Yeah. Sometimes it's better described by others, but in my own ways, maybe to come from my passion around it, and maybe that's what I can be remembered for. Is like I'm looking out for how do we make this agriculture easy and simple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what my passion is to share information and the knowledge, and also bridge the gap, to be able to lend to be able to lend to smallholder farmers, demystify some of the myths
Mm-hmm.
that we
Mm-hmm.
have. Some crops, this can be done in Zambia.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would say I can be remembered for. I'm very passionate about agriculture, balanced in terms of views, in terms of models that work in a way. That's what I could be remembered for. And yeah, one person that uh, will provide advice to public sector policy decision makers, to businesses, to my grandmother out there.
The AI.
Uh, Henry, I take interest. Few days I was at an agri-tech expo, and I found a number of people, women particularly, were in good numbers. They were trying to find out how to grow vegetables at one stand of a seed company. And I distributed my card to them.
Yeah.
And I said, please reach out. there is support for you to access financing under our government program, which is
Mm-hmm.
Sustainable Agriculture Finance
Yes.
Facility, which is very low at 16%. I feel I feel, and I said, look, reach out to me because I felt people are not, why are people not aware
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
such a thing? So
The asymmetry.
I shared my card. I says, please call me if you have any challenge and they're struggling to apply for this. Call. Let's see if we can support. Yeah. So that's me and that's my passion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cheyo, it's been an honor having you on our show. Thank you so much for coming through.
No, my pleasure as well. Thank you for hosting me and wish you all the best. And hopefully we can collaborate and discuss many more other things in this sector.
Definitely,
Thank you.
definitely. To our viewers, thank you once more. Remember to like, comment, share. Also, talk about your experiences in the comment section and any takeaways that you have from this session. From us at Money and People, it's bye.